Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Welcome to the recap for the Sumo Chaos Bowl of May 2026. I know a lot of people lost interest when so many top guys dropped out because it didn't seem, correctly competitive. And I get that. But if you tuned out, you missed some barn burner fights from the guys who saw the unexpected silence of the upper ranks as an opportunity to make some noise of their own. Before we begin, I'd like to clarify that Monster Energy drinks have not, in fact, begun sponsoring our videos. That was a joke and not intended to indicate that we have hit some tangential version of the big time. Sorry, Mom. Okay, let's do some recap and see who won the tier list game. Me, the community, or Cyberstag from the New to Sumo podcast.
Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead! Bring out your dead!
Koto Zakura. Look, I understand that one Yokozuna and one Kadobano Zeki were already out, and Koto Zakura, say what else you will about him, clearly feels a duty to Sumo to give it what he's got. And when you're that guy, the pressure to hang in could have only increased when Lady Luck turned her most malevolent gaze on Hoshoryu and Takayasu so quickly. But dropping out after loss number 8 says he felt compelled to stay in until he could no longer avoid going Kadoban, which I think we knew that was coming around loss 5 or 6 at the latest. And we found out when he went Kyujo that he suffered a back injury before the tournament ever started. So once things went sideways, he was fully aware no miracle comeback was on the horizon. Sumo brain is sumo brain, so I'm not going to actively criticize the choice. I'm just going to point out that the only useful thing that came of staying in that long is that we discovered exactly how bad a shape Wakamoto Haru must be in. Asakoryu. Asakoryu's become the guy who we know shouldn't have the juice to succeed once he hits a certain level, but who keeps saying maybe we don't know what that level is. That makes the knee injury he suffered against Shodai all the more gut-wrenching. The smaller the wrestler, the more they need their health to compete. Like, Takano Sho's able to have a career with a torn ACL because his leg is the size of Asakoryu. Asakoryu himself? I guess we'll find out. Of course, it turns out this wasn't a new injury, but a worsening of one he suffered in practice between bashos. Now, to their credit, in discussing the injury situation this basho, the Yokozuna Deliberation Council questioned all the tour dates these guys have between tournaments. The way I figure, if esports can dial back the live performances and have a smaller number of special road shows because of money, y'all can do it for the health of your athletes and your sport. If you don't know anything about esports, trust me, the metaphor works. Asanoyama. Of all the things to bring down a guy lugging around a huge knee brace, it's a sprained toe. Asanoyama was in the midst of another solid basho, although it's hard to argue he performed at the same level as January and March. In those, he mainly struggled near the end. This time, he spent most fights lumbering around like Pooh Bear desperate for honey, even though he still got his wins. Staying out the last 4 days was probably wise, not just for his toe, but his overall health. Now, for those of you who like the tier list game, this is where one of the long-standing rules comes in. If someone drops out, they don't count. I understand if you're part of the community and you want that point for Asanoyama's 7 wins. But to keep it brief for the people who are just here for the sumo, I don't want anyone, the community, the guest, or myself, to feel like they have to guess whether a wrestler who will make it through the whole basho. We're predicting how we think someone will do over 15 fights, and if they miss enough matches that a right pick could have been made wrong, or a wrong pick right, it's simplest to just leave them out. I'll make exceptions if they're obviously necessary, but this isn't one of those times. Minor spoiler for this basho, it wouldn't change who wins. But we gotta keep going to see who that is. On to the Kumbaya picks, where everyone held hands and jumped into the same pool. Ura. We gotta start with Pinky, right? Faith in Ura was rewarded on all fronts as everyone predicted big things and scored off his 10 wins. He had a fabulous basho, avenging his defeat to Kotoeho in March and running the pockets of nearly everyone who didn't have a significant physical advantage over him. Even the rematch war he lost to Tobizaru was a brilliant piece of fighting from both men. I mean, who'd have thought the day 2 loss to Nishiki Fuji would have turned out to be his only what-if moment from an actual Yusho run? And, apparently, his response to the press about his performance was, I think 10 wins is enough, right? F***ing king. And on the absolute flip side of our quote-unquote winner picks was Abi. Our belief in Abi's powers of recovery proved desperately unfounded, as a decent start left us slowly fading into a pit of despair as he kept getting thrown into one. Truth be told, nothing about his performance suggested we were wrong to think his back was okay. Our mistake was forgetting about how shaky his elbows are. I can't even say he got done dirty with a final day matchup against Oho, since they could have dug up Oho's grandpa to face him and it would have been a coin flip. Just a fucking disaster all around. Wakamoto Haru. Okay, I said Abi was the disaster a bit too soon. Maybe Wakamoto Haru and the injured third brother fed all their energy into Waka Prime because this Waka had nothing going for him. Yeah, he got saddled with what passed for a full set of Sanyaku matches because of all the injuries, but does anyone think that dodging the Sanyaku would have served up 3 more wins in this state? The most damning part is, looking at his schedule in retrospect, it's hard to call any of those losses surprising. And that's before we recall how damaged Kotozakura was in their match. Seems like he and Abi are about to battle for the title of July's biggest question mark. Asahakuryu. Everyone leaned positive with Asahakuryu, and everyone was betrayed. The shocking part, though, is just how sideways everything went. Much like in his January debut, once he got handed some losses, everyone started looking like Bugs Bunny to his Elmer Fudd. Like in his Day 2 win over Oshoma, once they find a static position, he reacts very quickly to Oshoma's move and takes what is an easy dub. That's when he's on point. But spin it forward to Day 9 against Shodai, who he was 2-0 against at the time, and he's got nothing. He just gets pushed around. If you think, well, Shodai got him sliding backwards, it happens, here he is against Shishi on Day 13. Shishi drags him around by the arm, and once Asahakuryu opts to stop defending and trade double belt grips, Shishi shows all the aggression and straight bulldozes his ass. You can't quit playing defense and then not go on offense unless you're the Vancouver Canucks. Watching him in Juryo, Asahakuryu was not the guy I thought would be easy to throw off his game mentally. And maybe that's not what's going on here. Sure looks like it though. Oshoumi. Of Oshoumi's 4 wins, 1 was over Busted, 1 was over Old, 1 over Old and Busted, and 1 over Shishi. Everyone banked on decently healthy Oshoumi showing up, but he never made it off the bus. Tobizaru. Watching this version of Tobizaru made me think, man, I wish you weren't such a complete dick to your stablemates. But even with that taking an edge off the fun, it was a hell of a show, and his battle with Ura was peak Sumo. We all blew this pick because everyone figured he was on the fade, and we thought that because, for the last year, it's absolutely been true. Even his 9-6 at the same rank last September came against a set of also-rans who weren't in the mix this time. But he got every win he should have, then added Wakano Sho and Asanoyama, legitimately this time, on top of it. His recent struggles have been due to lingering injuries, and I suppose we'll see in July if he's actually recovered or if this was a one-time feel-good moment. For now, he gets the dub and the rest of us take the L. Ryuden. Predicted bad, got worse. Really, the difference between 5 and 6 wins for Ryuden was him doing exactly what he wanted against Kinbozan, as usual, but this time Kinbo shucking him off and finally getting on the board in that matchup. A miss, but not a disappointing one. Hiradaumi. Now y'all see why I don't put a lot of faith in Hiradaumi at this level. Not finding 8 wins with this many monsters gone is like getting caught robbing a bank after they left the doors unlocked and the alarms off. Honestly, after this, it's kind of amazing he went 7-8 in March with most of those top guys in the building. I said this in a post during the Ba show. Hiradaumi's the ex-underdog who all the top guys got sick of, so even the ones who might be prone to an upset dig in and make sure they beat him. It's not a recipe for success. Thankfully, we all knew it. Chiyoshoma. And just like we were rewarded for our faith in Ura, we were equally rewarded for a very different type of faith in Chiyoshoma. Of course, it felt pretty tenuous when he ran his record to a frankly unbelievable 4-3, especially since all 4 wins were against opponents who have broadly stomped him in the head-to-head. But Abi and Nishiki Fuji were hurt, and Shodai was Shodaiing all over the damn place, so the crash back to Earth was swift. Which means 1 more losing record before he falls near the bottom of the division and again rises like the boulder was rolled away from the operating table. Now for the picks where we split but the scores didn't. Waka no Sho. I had a little more faith in non-bro Waka than the competition, and truth is, I think they were more correct than me. One of Waka no Sho's strongest suits as a big-hitting power guy is staying over his own feet, something it's a lot easier to appreciate if you've seen enough pre-2026 Gonoyama. But somewhere along the way, he got out of rhythm and just couldn't keep up with some of his surprisingly tough competition. 9-6 is a solid record, but it was his turn to get the lucky schedule, finishing with Nishiki Fuji, Kinbozan, and Asahakuryu rather than anyone performing near his level. Everyone's picks hit, but I feel kind of fortunate it worked out that way. Atami Fuji. The reverse of Waka no Sho, Atami's the guy where I lack the faith of the others, and I think I had it more correct. As Sekiwake, even if the whole Sanyaku had been present, he wouldn't have faced the guys above him until fairly late in the basho. That's why, if he was really worthy of the rank, he'd have stomped out a bunch of wins early instead of that 2-4 shit show where he showed all the juice of a dead car battery. Under normal circumstances, we'd be back on Maegashira watch waiting to see if he could muster another run to the Sanyaku. Instead, he blazed through an absolute dream schedule and still got punted off 10 wins by Churina Umi. Depending on who looks ready to go in July, I probably won't hope for nearly as much as I did this time. But this time, he paid off for everyone. Fuji Seiyun. This Fuji, of the many Fujis, looked exactly like the guy Cyberstag and I expected for a week. Then came the losses to Abi and Nishiki Fuji, who were already starting to collapse, which did him no favors leading into far tougher matches against Asanoyama, Kotoshoho, and Atami Fuji. Just like that, a 5-2 Sun run turned into a 5-7 nightmare. But in his worst moment, he took down Fujinokawa and Hirota Umi to squeak himself into a 7-7 Darwin match. Except somehow no one else was 7-7. Instead, Hakuno Fuji came calling, and I think we all know how that one went. That 7-8 record might be a blessing in disguise though. 8-7 would have likely landed him at 4 West or 5 East, with at least a couple dates against the Sanyaku lined up, and we saw how poorly that went for him here. But beating top Maegashira like Fujinokawa and Hirota Umi, and barely missing a Kachikoshi despite facing Atami and Kotoshoho in matches that would never normally happen, show that we should expect him to be pretty good at this level. And now he gets another basho here to acclimate to Makuuchi life before, probably, hopefully, he really ends up in the Sanyaku's crosshairs. Oshoma. I spent this whole basho trying to figure out what to make of Oshoma, and I'm still not sure. I think he did pretty well. Like, once he got through the first few days, he fought far better than in January or March. It still looked like he gimped around a bit after matches, but it didn't seem to matter. Until it did. He had these wild swings during the basho, but none of them are that surprising in retrospect looking at the opponents. There were 5 straight wins after an 0-2 start, but the only functional opponent in there turned out to be Fuji Seiyun. Then came 4 losses against 4 guys who were at least fringe contenders for the Yusho. Then 3 more wins against a pretty decent set of opponents, and finally a scheduling nightmare loss to Atami Fuji at the end. As wins and losses go, those results put him at a remarkably consistent level. And like I said, this is the best he's looked all year by far. Right now, I have him getting bumped up to 5 West in July. The competition there will be far stiffer overall, but if he fights like he did here, another 8 wins might be pretty reasonable. I wouldn't bet my first dime on it, but it could happen. Mitakeumi. Mitakeumi is officially Sumo's version of an old man in a rocking chair on his porch. Stay off his lawn until he gets his 8 wins. Then he'll take a nap and you can play as you'd like. Ichi Yamamoto. In fairness to Ichi, his 6-9 finish isn't as affected by all the Sanyaku injuries as most. Sitting at 2 West meant he actually caught hands from 6 of them. But he's 0-7 since last May against the 3 that were missing, so this was still something of a best case scenario, and the community can thank their lucky stars for it. Wakataka Kage. I mean, who the f saw this coming? Takayasu legitimately looked like the healthier Komusubi coming into the basho. When can you ever say that? Yeah, Waka sat out the tour to take care of his injury, but apparently the triceps aren't that important for a grappler because he looked barely hampered by what should have been a half-functioning arm. He won the tournament, and a legion of fans hope this is the start of an Ozeki run that doesn't get ended by a blown-out knee, so it feels like this section should be longer. But Koto Sakura's dad slapping on the Mawashi and pretending to be his son for the last 4 days would have been less surprising than this Yusho. What else can I possibly say? Team Izagahama. Yoshi and the kid stepped up huge for Izagahama's stable, exceeding expectations in, let's just say, very different ways. Yoshi's basho was as straightforward as it gets. Everyone had middling expectations due to his general struggles against the top guys, and that didn't change here. He started 1-3 against a suite of Sanyaku opponents to open the basho. Then, once everyone else fell away and only Maegashira opponents were left, he boat raced the lot, only failing to make the playoff due to a nice bit of preparation from Fuji. Only failing to make the playoff due to a nice bit of preparation from Fuji. Only failing to make the playoff due to a nice bit of preparation from Fuji Ryoga. Hakuno Fuji, on the other hand, had repeated moments where his injured foot was obviously bothering him, including sitting and holding it more than once after a match. All of us figured that would happen. What none of us planned on was that he'd keep winning anyway. Not only that, but if you told us his schedule and record before the basho, I doubt any of us would have predicted more than 2 of his 4 losses. I mean, 11-4, but your losses are to Ura, Shishi, Matakayumi, and Oho? What the fuck is that? Unless I'm misunderstanding something though, he apparently had surgery on the foot, which I did not know about. That's an excellent thing because it obviously needed to get done, but even had I known, I doubt I would have expected him to bounce back so fully so soon. So, excellent job making us look silly, and in July, we'll see if he can finally do better than 8 wins with the Sanyaku rested and, well, at least rested. Team Koto. Speaking of a stable pair, how about the Koto Bros? Koto Shoho's an odd one. I had far less hope for him than Atami Fuji going into the basho, but with the toughest opponents out of the way, I also found his success less surprising. His wins were largely against the just okay portion of the Banzuke, but the Patriots ran that kind of schedule to the Super Bowl, so he's got nothing to apologize for. Plus, for whatever reason, he absolutely dumpsters Wakataka Kage, which was a nice little bonus. Kotoeho, though. None of us had any real hopes for him, despite starting March 6-2 and still being close enough to the bottom of the division to fight everyone down there. Even if we'd given a little more credence to March though, I doubt anyone would have predicted 10 wins, much less 10 wins in 12 days. But even more impressive than the rip and start was that not a single win seemed like a fluke or a lucky break. His janky looking win over Waka no Sho actually came off a well-timed arm grab and yanking Waka 2 off balance to recover. And the Oshoma match was only close because Oshoma made a nice throw attempt near the Tawara. Kotoeho straight up rode him to the edge of the ring before that. If he ends up around 6 East, the question again becomes if he's at too high a level to succeed. Maybe, but until he rises far enough to have a full Sanyaku schedule, or wrecks his elbow a second time, I expect him to be competitive. And hopefully we won't sorely underestimate him like this again. Shishi! Everyone thought Shishi would do decently going into the basho. Then we got this.
You go to hell! You go to hell and you die!
I never expected to be wrong about a guy in both performance and morality, but there you go. Commence the villain arc. Toki Hayate. Terran MCL, this is what you get. Enough guys with enough injuries do halfway decently that nobody expected this much of a drop-off, but it's not surprising. That being said, I don't know how the hell he had this ass out of a basho, yet beat Asanoyama halfway through. Boggling. Tamawashi. A lot of people have asked if he'll retire. As far as I know, he said he'll continue in Juryo. But tying his worst career record in a basho with his leg that taped up is not exactly a predictor of future success, so Iron Man fans better hope whatever's wrong heals up before he hits Makushita and dips for good. I won't feel bad about holding out hope he'd do decently, but... And now for the main event. All the picks where who's winning actually changes. Kirishima. What a funky basho for Sumo's only surviving Ozeki. With so many top dogs out, there were questions as to who could even beat him. But he's vulnerable enough that 14 plus wins was always a pipe dream, and truth be told, it's not like he got unfortunate in any of the losses. He just got beat. As it turned out, that God Mode Uchari he pulled off against Kotoeho is the only reason he even hit 12. And even though he had quite a few longer matches where he never looked too pressed, long matches inherently leave more potential openings for the opponent, especially for someone who's not the most physically stacked Rikishi on the chart. He's technically up for Yokozuna promotion with a good enough result in July. I've been saying 14-1, but we're living in an era where 12-3 is a very normal winning score, and we've only seen 3 14-1 since 2022. So I'm revising that to a 14-1 Yusha will definitely get him promoted, and a 13-2 will allow for discussion, especially if he has no trash losses and doesn't blow fights at the end of the tournament. Let's see who's back in July to challenge his dream. Somehow I'm the only one who got this right, but I'll take it. Fujinokawa. Oh, hang on, I wrote about this in the tier list. If he shows no sign of injury, I won't be surprised if he finishes 7-8 and shames this prediction. So, even though I'm the only one who got this wrong officially, I did nail it in my own way. We should note that they scheduled Fuji a little weirdly near the end. They put him against Ura on day 14 when normal scheduling would have put him against Chura no Umi. Ura and Chura were both 9-4, so I can't say they did Fuji dirty. In fact, maybe they desperately wanted him in the Sanyaku and thought a lower ranked opponent would help. It's not like they couldn't have made the schedule work with Chura no Umi. Ura could have just faced Gonoyama in Chura's place. Given that Fujinokawa hasn't done great against either one, odds are the result would have been the same. What matters more is that this may have been Fuji's best crack at the Sanyaku, at least in the near future. If Hiro to Umi couldn't rob the bank, I guess Fuji just ran past it before they were closed. Takano Sho. And now we get to Cyberstag's version of Fujinokawa. Another wrestler it was perfectly sensible to doubt, given how badly he's done at these ranks in the past few years, and who unquestionably racked up wins he'd never have had a chance at without so many missing elites. What's incredible is that his 5 Sanyaku matches came in the first 5 days, he finished that run 3-2, and he still couldn't swing a winning record. On paper, the blame mostly falls on his losses to Ichi Yamamoto and Oshoma, opponents he was a combined 12-1 against coming into the Basho. The fans, however, will point every finger and some of their toes at the Oshoma fight and the entire officiating crew cosplaying the See No Evil monkey when Oshoma scraped up a sandbox worth of dirt mid-fight. That being Takano Sho's 8th loss was just salt in the wound. But a win there probably makes his schedule a little harder at the end, and honestly, this was a very 7-8 performance. I think he got exactly the right record for the sumo he showed. Oho! After I finished the tier list, I thought I had too many guys ranked too low, so I bumped Oho and Shishi up a notch. That's the reason I got Shishi wrong, but also why I got Oho right. That means Oho has taken the edge off me being mad at Shishi. I don't understand the world anymore. I don't think this point is worth the existential crisis. The only stability I can count on is that Oho did it by starting 3-6, then running off 6 wins in a row, which is the most f***ing Oho thing of all time. Daisho. You know, when I essentially predicted Daisho to finish 7-8, I didn't realize just how 7-8 he would be. He beat all the guys that made sense, he lost to all the guys that made sense, and I'm frankly convinced they put him against Matakayumi on day 15 because he already had a losing record and he'd probably be the nicest of anyone while still hitting hard enough to make sure he won. Of course, I kept trying to find a joke about him finishing 7-8 until the heat death of the universe, but I couldn't get rid of the pesky reality that he low-key benefited a lot from the injury fairy coming for everyone's limbs. This might get worse before it gets better. Gonoyama! Somehow, the least Gonoyama Basho turned into the most Gonoyama one. Nobody believed we'd see a repeat of March because obviously we didn't, because it's Gonoyama. He can only not Gonoyama for so long. Then, miraculously, he continued to not Gonoyama. His feet stayed under him for record lengths of time, and not only did that lead to an 8-2 start, that included a 4-0 record against the Sanyaku. Then the Ichi Yamamoto fight took forever, Ichi threw him down, and Gonoyama's body turned back into a pumpkin. He's never beaten Waka Prime, so going for the big smash made some sense, but he never dialed smash mode back out of the red, and suddenly, no more wins for Gono. So realistically, nobody predicted Gonoyama's Basho, but I'll take free points where I can get them. Shodai. Coming into the Basho, Shodai had won 4 in a row against Wakamoto Haru and Gonoyama and was 8-1 lifetime against Chiyoshoma and Kota Shoho. He lost to all 4, but he'd lost both previous matches to Asakoryu and 7 straight to Kirishima and won those. I'll take the Jimi Hendrix experience over the Shodai Chaos version, but at least the Shodai one is okay if you don't expect to be happy at the end. Chura no Umi. Hell yeah, community, Chura provides. Alright, we got a little fortunate that Koto Zakura pulled out before their match, because even this version of Koto probably would have picked Chura up and deposited to him in a fan's lap like a raffle prize. But he also hit 9 wins despite Daisho looking like he's finally dialed into the matchup, and took just his 3rd win in 13 fights against Tatami Fuji. Plus, not only did he still look like Sumo Sun Tzu, he got into a fucking brawl with Gonoyama and won with nothing other than pushing Gono's left arm in and otherwise beating his ass. It's like now that his tactics have ramped up, he's also more willing to stand in the pocket in battle. He's still going to be limited at the top level, but in these higher mid ranks, he is a danger. A fun one if you're not the guy who has to try and knock him over. Nishiki Fuji. I mean, we can just cue the commentary on Abi except stick to talking about elbows. If we need to find positives, well, whatever magic he has against Fuji Seiyun held up, and his first win in 7 against Ura is even more baffling in retrospect than it was at the time. But mostly, his arms looked so wrecked I wondered what the odds were of a switch to soccer. Congrats, of a sort, to Cyberstag for seeing this coming. Kinbozan! Alright, so this is what I figure is going on. There's a spell in Dungeons & Dragons called Simulacrum. The short version is, it creates a copy of a person, but the copy is only half strength. I think, after his neck injury, in order to lengthen his career, Kinbozan had a simulacrum of himself made and sends it out to fight for him whenever it can probably win enough to keep him from being demoted to Juryo. That's why he got demoted all the way from Maegashira 12 at the end of 2024. He didn't expect the copy to get him cast down from all the way up there, so he had to come back and stomp face the next 2 Bashos. That set him up nice and cozy at Maegashira 5, which let him fade out until March. Then he was 16 West and needed wins, so he showed up again. Now he's on another break. I have no other explanation for how he can look this f***ing hopeless. Roga! If I had a nickel for every time I predicted Roga to do well and he followed through, I'd have 2 nickels, but it's cool to have seen it coming both times. His overall performances are remarkably stable relative to how he's performed against his likely opponents. If he stopped having some bizarre wins and losses along the way, he'd be a friggin' unicorn. Stable records are good enough. And the last man on the list, the bombshell from the bottom, it's Fujiryoga. This is what I expected in March, and I just got burned a little too hard in that basho to hope for it this time instead. He was better in the grapple in May, and while that particular bar is in the 3rd layer of hell, improvement is improvement. After all, Yoshino Fuji clearly didn't expect him to have that arm lift in his bag of tricks. Of course, it's still a flaw in his game, one exploited perfectly by Hakuno Fuji and Ura, and the number of one-trick abusers only climbs as you go up the ranks. But the nerves are gone, and he is a scary boy to face for anyone not capable of hip-tossing a bulldozer. And that's the tier list recap for May 2026. With final scores of
17, 14, 15.
I finally managed to win at my own game, and now I can only hope it doesn't require such a batshit basho for that to happen. Big thanks to Cyberstag for playing, and to the community for making your voices heard. Speaking of talking online, join our Discord. Link for that is in the description. And, I haven't done a proper wrestler breakdown in a minute. I got away from them because a lot of guys don't garner that much interest, but I need to get back into that flow. So hit the comments or the Discord, or both, and let me know who you want to know more about. Other than that, I gotta figure out another 2nd level spell I want for my Blade Singer, so have a great day and I will see you soon.